my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a book review of Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Paterson. I know that this is a fairly popular middle grade book that was written in the 70s, so a lot of people probably know about this book already, but if you haven't heard about this book, hopefully this review will give you some illumination. So ultimately this book is about a friendship between a boy named Jess and a girl named Leslie and their make-believe world of Terabithia. This book is kind of written in three parts. The first part shows Jess being not so much an outsider, but really holding back on parts of himself because he knows that they don't fit into the norms of his really small ranch farming town. He loves to draw and he loves to paint, but he knows that if he says that he likes to do that over, say, football, that he's going to get really funny looks and he'll probably be made fun of. The second act of this book is him befriending Leslie and them starting to build the world of Terabithia together. I'll talk about the third act later on because it does contain some major spoilers. I will label when the spoilers start, so that way you can stop the video if you don't want to be spoiled with the rest of the book. Overall, I really loved this book. It really showcases how people can feel othered in their small towns, and especially if their group is really homogenized, I believe is the word, but where everyone is so very similar and you're expected to have similar interests as everyone else, when you even have just a little bit of difference, it can stand out. So this is shown, as said, with Jess, who really loves to paint and do art, and how he hides that, and it's really shown with Leslie when she comes into the picture because she's a girl with really short hair. She wears shorts and pants more so than dresses and skirts, so that really sets her apart from all the other young ladies in the school, and not in a good way. Like, it's not in the I'm not like other girls good kind of way. It's she's made fun of, she's really kind of side-eyed a lot. When they do form a friendship, it's based on that differences that they have and really how they become friends after Leslie beats every boy in like foot racing isn't exactly the most smoothest path, but they become friends and they really celebrate the differences of each other. And I loved that. I loved that showcasing. And I loved how it shows kids' imaginations. I miss those times of childhood of building whole new worlds with your friends and going out and living in those worlds for just a little bit of time. I'm really looking forward to when my son does that because I really want to know what worlds he'll come up with. So there was a part in this book that kind of made me scratch my head a bit. And what it was that there is a character, and I believe her name is Janie. I'll fix it somewhere here if it needs to be fixed. But there's this character who is a little bit of a more robust gal in the school, and she's also a mean girl. Like, she's not very nice at all. She'll get physical with you, that kind of way. Then there's also this teacher who is a little bit on the rotund side, and she's not the nicest either. Well, Leslie and Jess are one day talking about these two, and they're making fun of their weight really heavily. This gave me a little bit of pause because it kind of settled into that stereotype, especially in children's literature, where the bigger the person is, the meaner they are. And I really thought that was kind of odd that that happened. Now, I did keep reading on because I wanted to see where it was going with that kind of mindset, and I'm glad I did because I really feel like the author did a good job of later on showing that these two characters are two well-rounded individuals, that they're human. I think that with the making fun of the two characters' weights, that people will tend to pick on what they can see first if they don't like a particular person or if they feel like a particular person's mean. So it makes sense. I think people being a little bit heavier was far more like back in the 70s, so it does make a certain sense that that's what they would pick on these two characters on. So yeah. And then those two characters are a little bit redeemed later on. Something that was done especially well with Janie as a character is that she ends up stealing Jess's little sister's food, like a Twinkie, I think it is. And at first I thought this was like another like big person joke, but later on it's found out that Janie's father abuses her. And so then I thought to myself, I don't know if the author did this on purpose, but one of the signs of kids being abused and neglected is major food hoarding and kind of that lashing out, stealing kind of gestures can be a sign of abuse and neglect. It isn't always, but it can be a sign. And so I thought that was really played in well, and I don't know if the author did that on purpose, but if she did, bravo, because I thought that was really well done. So now I'm going to talk about the third act of this book. So, spoilers. The third act of this book, one day it's really raining really heavily next to Jess's house and Leslie's house, their neighbors, and Terabithia, the make-believe land that they have, is a little bit deeper in the woods. And to get there, you have to, like, swing across on this rope swing. Well, one day it's raining really hard, and Jess ends up actually being invited by his teacher, by one of his teachers, to go into the city and, like, go on this just fun trip. He decides to go on this trip instead of, going with Leslie and playing in Terabithia. And admittedly, he's a little bit afraid to play in Terabithia at this moment because of the heavy rains, and it's a little bit dangerous. Unfortunately, Leslie goes to their make-believe land by herself, and she ends up dying because she falls and ends up, I think, hitting her head, and she ends up passing away. This author did such a great job showing grief and how grief can manifest so differently in different people, and also how sometimes grief can manifest in a way that other people think is really strange. So, for example, when Jess is told that Leslie passes, the next morning his mom makes him pancakes, and he kind of just sits and eats breakfast and just wants more and more to eat. And Jess has sisters, and one of his sisters comments that he's not crying, that he's not shedding tears for his friend, and that's really weird. Jess is kind of ignoring her a little bit and just focusing on his food and just trying to shut her out, and Jess's mom is trying to shut his sister up by being like, stop, just stop. But that scene really got to me because, as I said, the grief can come out in so many different ways. And I remember when I was going through a really rough time and I was going through my own grief cycle, and people had expected me to act one way, and I didn't. And I acted in a completely other way in my grief. And, people make comments like, oh, I would never do such a thing. And it was that moment of trying to explain my mindset, but it being really difficult too. And so I felt that with Jess in that moment, that it's really hard to explain to people kind of, either this denial of the thing that happened, or just wanting to pause the world for a minute and forget your sadness. So I really felt for Jess. And when I read this part, by the way, it was 3 a.m. on September 1st, and I was feeding my son, and I was crying in my living room feeding my son at 3 a.m. because I was trying to get him to go back to sleep. But yeah, so overall, I thought that this book was phenomenally written. It really tugged at my heartstrings, and I think that if you haven't read this book yet, hopefully you didn't go through the spoilers, or if you did go through the spoilers, that's fine too. I think that if that is how you like to read books, kudos. Let me know if you've read this book, if it has affected you in some way, if you liked it, if you didn't like it. By all means, please tell me in the comments, or you can contact me at my social medias. I'll put them in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and may you get lost in a book.